Okay, let's go to one of our favorite guests here, who is the center of some very troubling news, Ezra Levant, Canadian journalist at rebelnews.com. That is rebelnews.com. Ezra, welcome to the program. Ezra, take some time and educate our audience on what you went through this last weekend and what is going on in the unfree country of Canada.
Thanks, Charlie. Great to be back on the show. And consider Canada a warning to Americans. If you don't hold tight to your constitutional freedoms, especially your First Amendment, you will go down the path like Canada and the United Kingdom. So consider us a warning from your near future. I live in a fairly Jewish neighborhood in North Toronto, and I saw online that some pro-Hamas came right into this residential neighborhood. Like, there's no political targets here. There's no embassy or anything. They just came to an area with apartment buildings where Jews live. And they recreated the final moments of Yahya Sinwar. That's the now deceased leader of the Hamas terrorist group. So they set up this whole ornate display. It was really gross, and I thought, wow, that's crazy. It would be like someone setting up a Hitler display, or, frankly, burning the KKK burning a cross outside a black church. So I went down there because I'm a journalist, I run Rebel News, and I went in pretty low key. I just wanted to take a photograph of this insane sort of display. And the police came up to me and said, "You're not allowed to do that." I said, "Well, I live here, I'm a citizen, I'm a neighbor, I'm on the public sidewalk. I'm not even talking to these Hamas folks. I'm just taking a photo." And the police sort of strong-armed me away. Now that bothered me, but I wasn't going to do anything about it. But another cop came up and said, "Your mere presence here, just by being here, is illegal because it's, quote, causing a disturbance and inciting the crowd." And you can see there's some activists behind the cops there waving Palestinian flags. They weren't criticizing me as a journalist. They were criticizing me as a Jew. They were talking about the Intifada, and they were talking about genocide and stuff. And I'm a free speech absolutist, by the way. I mean, I find that sort of gross. But the cops were basically saying, you cannot stand on the street because these will be triggered. And I said, well, I'm sorry, they don't have a veto over my civil rights. Well, these cops took the path of least resistance. They knew it was easier to arrest me because I wouldn't riot. So they arrested me, handcuffed me, took me to jail. And they were acting as the concierge for these pro-Hamas right in the middle of a Jewish neighborhood. And what gets me is, if they're law enforcement officers, enforce the law. Let me stand on a sidewalk. And if these things really are going to hurt me, don't arrest me. So that's what happened to me yesterday. I finally did get out of jail. And by the way, the police at the jail were quite nice to me. I think they realized this was BS. But this has happened 5 times in 2024 to one of our other journalists. So this is now a half a dozen times journalists have been arrested simply for doing journalism in Canada. Beware, Americans. We are a warning about your future.
So Ezra, just re-educate the audience. I guess you don't have a First Amendment at all, nor did you. You had your charter or Declaration of Rights, but it means absolutely nothing. And just so we are clear, you were doing an act of journalism. Yes? Correct? This was an act of journalism?
Yeah,
pure and
that's
simple?
right. That's what I do full time. It happened to be in my neighborhood, so it was very quick for me to go over there. The police know us because we have interacted with many of them before. There was this one moment where I said to one of the senior cops, I said, "You're not the law." He said, "Yes, I am the law." I said, "No, you're a servant of the law." Charlie, we do have a watered down version of your First Amendment. It's Section 2B of our charter, and it specifically protects the free press. And it looks good on paper, but it has never been interpreted as boldly as the American First Amendment. But still, in Canada, what this cop did to me was illegal. It violated my rights. Trouble is, I've got to now go to court, sue the police, and maybe in 2 years' time, I'll have my hearing. In the meantime, like I say, this is the 6th time they've simply snatched our reporters off the street. In this case, it was me. And they interfere with us because by the time justice catches up to them, Charlie, it's 1, 2, 3 years into the future. Believe it or not, one of our reporters was actually shot by a Mountie during the trucker convoy, not with a bullet, but with a riot gun. And she was injured, and the police absolutely targeted her. That was the only shooting in the entire, that was the only act of violence in the entire trucker convoy, was a cop shooting a Rebel News reporter, which is astonishing. So we're still in court over that. Justice up here is very slow. And in the meantime, the cops do what they want. And unfortunately, they become woke, especially the Mounties and the Toronto Police Service. They're run, I think a lot of the beat cops are pretty good people, and they don't understand this new two-tier policing. They don't understand why they have to be concierges for these pro-Hamas folks. There was actually another pro-Hamas protest in Toronto that they blocked off a road into a residential neighborhood. They blocked it. They stopped Jews from coming and going to their homes. And what did the police do? You're going to find this astonishing, Charlie. They brought coffee and donuts to the Hamas blockade to keep them warm because it was chilly out. The police literally brought coffee and donuts to these pro-Hamas. And I say pro-Hamas because they are. They're reenacting these moments. They're shouting for death to the Jews. And what gets me is the cops said, because you're upsetting them, your presence here is illegal. I don't live in Gaza. I live in Canada. And unfortunately, the cops are acting like Sharia police instead of Canadian police, Charlie.
So I just want to reiterate this. If a reporter is arrested in Russia, it makes international news because Russia is super unfree and we're supposed to hate Russia. I don't like Russia. However, you get arrested in Canada, and it's just kind of an eye roll. I mean, this is getting worse. It's not getting better. So President Trump is sworn in on January the 20th. If this continues, President Trump should just tell Canada, I'm doing a 10% tariff on all lumber coming into America. I mean, at some point, we need to use the muscle of the United States of America, or else Canada will become East Germany. Is that an exaggeration, Ezra?
Well, look at the United Kingdom, because they're further down the path than we are. They are jailing dozens of people for Twitter comments. I was released within a couple hours, Charlie, and they declined to press charges. I think they just wanted to humiliate me and handcuff me in public and get me out of there. So the UK is far worse. Now, I'm pleased to say, perhaps not Donald Trump himself, but Elon Musk certainly, who is in a way a proxy for Trump, has just been smashing their censorship. And I think it's got their attention. I would love it if people around the world said, I mean, obviously I support Canadian jobs and it would hurt Canada if there were tariffs, but I think just speaking clearly and about the moral importance of freedom and say, look, Canada and America are friends, but we are disappointed and concerned to see Canada deleting its historic free. I mean, we used to be just as free as you. 200 years ago, we were actually, I mean, we're close cousins. There's no two countries that are closer than Canada and America. And yes, we don't support freedoms as strongly as you, and it's a shame. But I think if just the moral authority of the president or an ambassador or a secretary of state, and I don't know if there even has to be a threat there. I think just if Canadians heard from an outside force saying, guys, we're starting to really worry about you. Normally we put Canada in the safe and freeze. Like this is Turkey, this is Iran, this is China, this is North Korea, like you say, it's Russia. But Canada? And I think simply an American friend sort of shaking us and say, what are you doing? Wake up. Justin Trudeau takes a lot of the blame for this because he has really gone to war against freedom of the press. On the one hand, he subsidizes what I call the regime media. Most Canadian journalists now work for the government. Our state broadcaster called the CBC. It's larger than all other media combined. So he's, on the one hand, he's got the carrot that he tempts the media to be, leftist like him. On the other hand, he has a stick. He's bringing in a brutal censorship law that would actually include, I know this is sort of crazy to hear, life in prison for a standalone hate crime, for hate speech. And it's just, he seeks to censor the internet because he's deeply unpopular. Like any tyrant, he wants to squelch opposition. But you can't put it all at Trudeau's feet. I think mass immigration has changed Canada's belief in freedom because now we've imported millions of people who come from countries where they don't value freedom of speech. And frankly, we've brought in a lot of people who are anti-Semitic, anti-Western, burn Canadian flags just like they burn American flags. And when you have millions of people brought in through mass immigration who actually hate the West, you know, the idea of censoring dissent I'm just worried about Canada's future. And that's why I say to Americans, seal your borders, shore up your constitutional freedoms, or you will become like us, or God forbid the UK. Now, you can always turn things around. Look at how close you guys came on November 5th. Like that was, you could have taken the wrong path there. So there's always hope. But in Canada, things are pretty bad, Charlie.
They're dismal. Just from a morale standpoint, what did you think when President Trump was elected? Did it give you a little shot in the arm, a little bit extra hope?
It did, because first of all, Canada is probably the one country in the world most affected by the U.S. Now, it gave me a worry too, Charlie, because I don't know if you thought about this. If Trump is going to do a mass deportation of illegals, including criminal illegals, where are they going to go? Now, they might be deported, they might try and hide, but we have the longest undefended border in the world between you and us. So it wouldn't surprise me if thousands, maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of illegals simply walk into Canada, say they're refugees from the evil Donald Trump. So I'm worried that about, you know, your problem walking north into our country. But other than that, I'm deeply relieved by Trump's victory. I think it's going to be a force for freedom and peace around the world. And obviously that's not, I mean, I understand each nation has to look after their own interests, but understand being next to America, it's like we're the mouse and you're the elephant. So anything that makes America stronger, freer, more hopeful, more peaceful, that's going to have a knock-on effect in our country. And so I'm really relieved by it. And by the
Really
way,
quick.
our media is totally
finish that thought.
anti-Trump.
Go ahead.
Despite it, we love
Yes.
Americans. Thanks for standing up for us, Charlie.
Always. All right, just 2 minutes here. Let's put 25 up on screen. This shows that the Conservative Party, led by Pierre Poilievre, with 41.2%. Ezra, one of your elections. Is Trudeau running again? Do a 2-minute, as quick as you can, Ezra, summary for Americans of what's going on in Canada politically.
Trudeau is deeply despised. He's in the low 20% in the polls, but he has this nasty coalition with the socialists keeping him in power. There's a great conservative opposition leader named Pierre Poilievre, very principled, and he's led the polls for a year, but unfortunately the election's probably a year away. I hope that undoes some of the damage that Trudeau has done. So like I say, hope is around the corner, but in the meantime, it's pretty bleak.
Yeah, and so when, I'm sorry, I might have missed it, Ezra, because we had some feedback issues, but when is
Probably
the election again? I'm sorry.
It can be called earlier, but it's most likely going to be October 2025. So we have one more year under Trudeau, and boy, are we looking forward to throwing him out.
And is there any way he could form a government, do a thing like France did, where he could perform poorly, however, cut a deal with the radicals? Is that conceivable?
He already did cut that deal, and that's how he's in power now. He is a minority government, but the official Socialist Party, called the NDP, is propping him up. So he did cut that deal, and that's how he's holding on to power, but that's going to expire next October.
Ezra, you're a great man, and as soon as President Trump gets sworn in, I think Canada is going to be a little less aggressive towards its citizens, because these are human rights violations, and if we as Americans go around and we lecture Russia, and we go lecture the third world, well, maybe we should lecture Canada and be willing to use tariffs to make sure that reporters aren't arrested in Canada. Thank you so much, Ezra. God bless you.
Thanks, Charlie.